I sat at my kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, listening as Christine flipped open the small planner she carried everywhere. Her pen moved across the page like she was running a board meeting, listing every detail as if I were an employee rather than the grandmother of her children. School drop-off at 8, pick-up at 3, Colton's allergy medicine in the evenings, lunches packed each night, soccer practice for the twins on Thursday. I tried to follow along, keeping my expression neutral, but my chest tightened with each item she added. Byron sat across from me, scrolling on his phone, barely glancing up. He never interrupted Christine. He never asked if I was free. He just let her list, assign, and dictate. And I listened, as I had so many times before. Then she said it. We booked a last-minute anniversary cruise. Just us. We leave Monday. It's not a request. Her eyes never met mine. The words hung in the air, heavy and certain, as if my agreement had already been assumed. I lifted my mug, took a slow sip, and set it down carefully on the coaster. The air felt tight around the kitchen, charged with expectation. I knew immediately that this was different from all the other times. The assumption of my compliance, the unspoken demand, pressed against me like a weight I wasn't ready to carry. I looked straight at Christine and Byron, a quiet determination building inside me, and I realized this time I wouldn't respond the way I always had. Next, I would have to decide exactly how to reclaim the choice that had been taken from me for years. I remember the first time I held Colton in my arms, tiny fingers curling around mine, and how I promised myself I would be there for him in every way I could. Those early days were simple and full of small joys. Saturday mornings spent baking slice and bake cookies, letting little hands press the dough flat while laughter filled the kitchen. I would read the same bedtime story 3 times, hearing every squeak, every sigh, letting the rhythm of those moments sink into my memory. I wanted to savor them because I knew they were fleeting. Driving to school, I kept a careful eye on traffic, the radio playing softly, while Byron or Christine tried to manage work calls or check emails. I carried extra snacks, packed water bottles, and kept a small first aid kit in the car. Every little detail mattered, and I found joy in the usefulness, in being included. When Colton fell asleep on my chest after a long day, I would sit perfectly still, listening to the rise and fall of his breath, and think, this is what life is for. Then came the twins, Lily and James, full of energy, curiosity, and questions that never seemed to stop. I found myself baking twice as many cookies, reading twice as many stories, and learning the nuances of soccer schedules, snack preferences, and bedtime routines. Each demand felt like an opportunity to show love, to prove that I could handle it all, even when it meant late nights and early mornings. Those early years built a pattern. Saying yes felt natural, instinctive, a measure of devotion. I didn't question the hours I spent in the car, the dishes I washed, or the meals I prepared. I believed that giving this much was part of the role I had chosen and cherished. Looking back, I can see how the seeds of overcommitment took root, slowly stretching my time and energy beyond what I realized. As I sit here now, listening to Christine's list and Byron's silence, I understand how those small beginnings shaped the boundaries, or the lack of them, that I would one day need to reclaim. Next, I would start noticing how love had quietly shifted into obligation, and how easily I had let it happen over the years. The simple joys of grandparenting slowly gave way to a relentless rhythm of obligations. What started as a few hours here and there became overnight stays, weekend errands, school projects, and endless meals that I prepared without complaint. Every request felt reasonable at the time, each just this once. Mom whispered in passing, until the once small favors grew into expectations I could no longer ignore. I found myself waking before dawn to make breakfast for 3, driving across town to handle forgotten school items, and returning home only to discover more chores waiting. I kept logs of medications and dosages for the twins, remembered Colton's food allergies, and made sure every homework packet was complete before anyone arrived. My own needs quietly slipped to the background, while the children's schedules and whims filled every corner of my life. Social media made it worse. While I drove through traffic with a tired Colton, arguing about a snack, I would glance at my phone and see Christine and Byron posting from a hotel pool or a weekend getaway. Smiling, relaxed, unburdened, photos of beachside breakfasts, laughter, and carefree evenings flashed past my screen. A quiet reminder of how little anyone noticed the labor that made their convenience possible. I didn't complain. I didn't pause or protest. Saying yes felt like love, like proof of my devotion. And I clung to the idea that if I gave enough, my family would notice, would appreciate, would understand. But slowly, imperceptibly, the feeling of love became entwined with obligation, and the joy of helping was replaced by a tight knot of exhaustion and subtle resentment. Each evening, as I set the dishes aside and tucked the children into bed, I would feel the weight of all the hours spent managing schedules and needs. The pattern was clear, and yet I continued, repeating the same cycle because it had always been my way, because I had always wanted to give. And in that pattern, I failed to see the quiet shift, how love had become work, and how easily I had let it happen. Next, I would reach the point where I realized the imbalance could no longer continue, and the anniversary trip would force a decision I had been putting off for years. The moment Christine told me about the anniversary trip, something inside me tightened. She didn't ask. She stated, a last-minute cruise, just the 2 of them. Leaving Monday. The expectation that I would be the one to watch the children hung in the air as if my agreement had already been given. Byron didn't look up from his phone. He didn't correct her or offer a word of protest. The silence around the table amplified the weight of the assumption. I felt that familiar pull, the one that had always made me nod, smile, and say yes even when my own exhaustion whispered otherwise. But this time, I felt the pattern clearly, like a line drawn in the sand that I had ignored for far too long. Every hour, every favor, every grocery run, every field trip, every bedtime story, it all led to this moment. I realized how often I had put their convenience above my own health, my own time, my own needs. Christine kept flipping pages, writing down the schedule with meticulous precision: school drop-offs, snacks, meals, homework checks, soccer practice, bedtime routines. I sat quietly, hands folded over my mug, heart tightening with the accumulation of all the years I had been expected to manage their world. The more she listed, the heavier the air became, and the more clearly I saw the imbalance. I thought about the nights I had stayed up late, correcting homework, preparing lunches, washing dishes that never seemed to stop, and the mornings I had rushed through my own routines to get them out the door. I remembered the countless times I had said yes out of love, out of habit, out of the belief that my devotion would be recognized. And now, as the weight of expectations settled around me, I understood something vital: this could not continue. The assumption of my compliance, the quiet demand for me to sacrifice yet again, was no longer acceptable. The anniversary trip wasn't just another favor they were taking me for granted. As they always had, for the first time in years, I felt the sharp clarity of choice, a certainty that I had been missing. I wouldn't nod. I wouldn't agree silently. I wouldn't allow this pattern to repeat itself. Next, I would decide how to reclaim control, how to respond in a way that finally acknowledged my own needs rather than theirs. Chapter 5. Claiming Boundaries. I looked directly at Christine, and for the first time in years, I allowed my voice to carry the weight of my own decision rather than the expectation of theirs. Perfect, I said evenly. I'll be leaving for my own cruise that week. You and your family can handle things however you like. Christine froze, her pen hovering mid-air, as if the words had broken the rhythm of her carefully constructed plan. Byron blinked up from his phone, eyes wide, like I had spoken a language he had never heard before. Silence settled across the kitchen table, heavy and unfamiliar. I didn't smile politely. I didn't offer a laugh to soften the blow. This was not a moment for performance. This was the first time I meant it completely. Every previous nod, every hesitant agreement, every silent yes had led me to this point. Now, the choice belonged entirely to me. Christine stammered. I thought, but no words could finish the thought. Byron opened his mouth, then closed it again, caught between his disbelief and the realization that this time I would not be moved. I set my mug down and let my gaze sweep the table, noting the pause, the shock, the tension. I had expected resistance, maybe even arguments, but none came immediately. Instead, there was just the quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. For years, I had put myself last, absorbing the endless requests and obligations without pause. Now, the balance had changed. The table, once a place of automatic acquiescence, became a place where my boundaries were clear, my voice firm, and my needs acknowledged. Next, I would prepare for the week ahead, gathering only what I needed, leaving behind the labor that had been expected of me for so long. That evening, I went through the motions with a sense of quiet purpose. I packed a small suitcase with just the essentials: 2 summer dresses, a light sweater for the evenings, a sun hat, a pair of sandals, and a bottle of sunscreen. I tucked in a couple of paperback novels I had been meaning to read and a journal I hadn't opened in months. Everything I packed was for me, and nothing more. I didn't reach for extra toys or snacks, didn't fold towels or arrange blankets for a sleepover. The house would remain as it was, a visible reminder that this week, it would not be my responsibility to manage every need of the children. I moved deliberately through each room, noticing the quiet spaces, the empty counters, the shelves left bare. For the first time in years, the house felt like it belonged to me, and it felt right. I lined up my toiletries neatly. Nothing excessive. No bottles of lotion or toothpaste for anyone but myself. The pack and play, the coloring books, the little snacks I had kept just in case they stayed in their places. Untouched, unprepared, I had spent years preparing for everyone else. Now, I prepared for myself. Closing the suitcase felt like a release. The zipper slid smoothly into place, sealing away not just my clothes and books, but the expectation that had rested on my shoulders for so long. I paused for a moment, standing in the quiet house, sensing the difference in the air. I was reclaiming my time, my energy, my choices. The shift was small, but monumental. And for the first time, I felt the satisfaction of control that had been denied to me for decades. Next, I would leave the house behind and let my family face the consequences of the week without my constant supervision. The next morning, I was already on the road when the chaos began at home. I imagined Byron backing the car into the driveway, Christine juggling a bag in one hand and a phone in the other, and the 3 children arguing about whose turn it was to carry what. I knew the house would be silent at first, then quickly fill with confusion. When they opened the front door, they found only empty counters. No prepared lunches, no neatly folded towels, no toys laid out. Christine's planner was left on the table, open to the week's schedule. and Byron glanced around as if expecting the usual routines to magically appear. Colton immediately noticed that his favorite cereal wasn't where it should be, and Lily and James began squabbling over what shoes to wear. Christine's phone rang constantly as she tried to call, text, and coordinate, while Byron fumbled with backpacks, papers, and missing permission slips. The children cried, complained, and asked questions that had no answers. Every request she made to them was met with frustration or confusion because the system she relied on, the preparation I always provided, was gone. I pictured the scene clearly in my mind, and a small part of me smiled. For years, I had moved through these same motions without acknowledgement, without pause, and without complaint. Now, the roles were reversed. The family had to navigate a week of schedules, meals, and responsibilities on their own, and the discomfort was theirs to manage. I allowed myself a quiet satisfaction in imagining the lessons being learned without confrontation, without raising my voice, without arguing. The chaos was a natural consequence of the expectations they had imposed on me for so long. I had provided for every detail, absorbed every burden, and carried the weight of the household for years. Now, the burden rested squarely on their shoulders. As I drove further from the house, the tension in my chest eased. The week ahead was mine to control, and I would meet it with calm certainty and purpose. Next, I would finally experience the freedom and personal joy that had been denied to me for so many years. The cruise ship towered above me as I rolled my suitcase across the gangway. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to manage someone else's schedule. Didn't have to check homework, pack lunches, or refill snack boxes. The air smelled of salt and sunlight. And for a moment, I let it wash over me, absorbing the unfamiliar sense of calm. On board, I claimed my stateroom and unpacked only what I needed. The small window framed the endless expanse of blue water, and I stood there for a long while, just breathing. No responsibilities waited for me here, no urgent phone calls, no lists of tasks that demanded my attention. The freedom was profound, almost dizzying, but it felt exactly right. I explored the decks, walking slowly along the rail, feeling the breeze on my face, letting my mind wander. I joined a morning stretch session, laughed at the trivial mistakes in bingo, and made small talk with fellow travelers, people my age who seemed to understand the value of savoring these moments. I tried shrimp I didn't have to peel, read a book without interruption, and simply let the days unfold at their own pace. For the first time in decades, I experienced time as my own, measured not by the needs of others, but by my own curiosity and pleasure. I swam when I wanted, lingered over coffee on the deck, and watched the horizon stretch endlessly before me. Each moment reinforced the knowledge that my life didn't belong to anyone else but me. In the quiet evenings, I sat on the balcony, journal in hand, recording thoughts and observations that had no connection to anyone but myself. I could hear the laughter of other passengers in the distance and feel the subtle sway of the ship beneath me. It was a simple joy, yet so profound it left me both exhilarated and at peace. I realized that years of self-sacrifice had been a lifetime of waiting for permission I never needed. Here, I was free to exist fully in my own life, and the satisfaction was intoxicating. Next, I would return home, carrying this newfound sense of autonomy with me, ready to reorganize my life on my own terms. The moment I turned the key and stepped inside my house, the quiet hit me in a way I hadn't felt in years. No piles of laundry waiting, no backpacks tossed by the door, no last-minute requests hanging in the air. The space felt open, calm, and entirely mine. I set my suitcase down and walked through each room. noticing the difference between the house arranged around my needs rather than the demands of others. I unpacked slowly, placing my clothes in the drawers I had chosen for myself, stacking my books on the shelf where I could reach them easily. The house no longer carried the weight of expectation. I could sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and let the silence stretch without feeling guilty. For the first time in a long while, I realized that I didn't have to be on call for anyone else to justify my presence in this home. Over the next few days, I began to establish long-term boundaries. I signed up for water aerobics at the community center, joined a local book club, and blocked time in my calendar for reading and walks. Each small commitment to myself reinforced a growing sense of empowerment. I no longer measured my value by how much I gave to others. I measured it by how I respected my own needs and time. Returning to the routines of daily life, I could already feel the subtle shift. I answered messages from family when it was convenient, not as a reflex, and I approached each task with intention rather than obligation. The house had become a sanctuary, a place where I could nurture my own life and still care for my family on my terms. Next, I would reflect fully on the lessons of this week, understanding the depth of my growth and the importance of maintaining these boundaries moving forward. Sitting quietly in my living room, I reflected on the week and everything it had revealed. For years, I had measured my worth by how much I could do for others, allowing my own needs and desires to slip quietly into the background. I had believed that love meant endless giving, that sacrifice was proof of devotion. Now I understood that prioritizing myself was not selfish, it was necessary. I had reclaimed my time, my energy, and my sense of self. Each decision to say no, each moment I spent pursuing my own interests, reinforced the lesson I had avoided for decades. My life was mine to live fully. The chores, the errands, the constant attention I had given were acts of love. Yes, but they had also been a slow erosion of my own autonomy. I would continue to care for my family, but on terms that respected my boundaries, my health, and my peace of mind. This week had been more than a cruise. It had been a statement. I was no longer defined solely by what I did for others. I was Evelyn Harper, a woman capable of love without losing herself, and I intended to keep it that way. Having learned this, I felt a quiet confidence, ready to step into a life balanced between care for others and care for myself.